Folks, buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the latest economic circus act, Trump's so-called trade deal with China. Spoiler alert, it's less of a deal and more of a masterclass in government mismanagement, economic posturing, and a one-way ticket to recessionville. I'm your host, the guy who's here to tell you why the suits in Washington are tanking your wallet, your job, and your future. Let's get into it. Oh, look, everyone, Donald Trump's back on social media, screaming in all caps about his excellent relationship with Xi Jinping and a supposed trade framework that's done, subject to final approval. Sounds like a win, right? Wrong. This is classic Trump, overhyped promises, vague details, and a whole lot of economic smoke and mirrors. And guess what, folks? The markets aren't buying it either. U.S. equity indexes were bouncing around like a yo-yo on June 11, 2025, because investors know this deal is about as solid as a house of cards in a windstorm. So, what's the deal? According to Trump, China's going to supply rare earths and magnets up front, the U.S. will let Chinese students back into our colleges, and tariffs will stay at their current, lower levels. Oh, and Trump's bragging about a 55% tariff rate on China while they only get 10% on us. Sounds like a slam dunk, right? Not so fast. Let's peel back the layers of this economic onion and see why this is less of a victory and more of a government-induced disaster waiting to happen. First off, let's talk tariffs. Trump's out here acting like maintaining tariffs at current, lower levels is some kind of genius move. But here's the reality, folks, tariffs are a tax on you, the American consumer. According to the American Action Forum, U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods have already cost American households an average of $1,300 per year since 2018. And guess what? Those lower tariffs Trump's bragging about. They're still higher than they were before he took office in 2017. So, congratulations, America, you're paying more for everything from electronics to car parts, all because the government thinks it's winning a trade war. And let's not forget the flip side, China's retaliatory tariffs have crushed U.S. exporters, especially farmers. Soybean exports to China, which used to be a $14 billion industry, have plummeted by over 50% since the trade war began, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The government's response? Handing out billions in farm subsidies to paper over the damage. That's right, folks, your tax dollars are bailing out an industry that the government itself kneecapped. If that's not economic mismanagement, I don't know what is. But wait, there's more. Trump's claim of a 55% tariff rate on China. It's a mishmash of baseline duties, fentanyl-related charges, and leftover levies from his first term. And according to Neo Wong at Evercore ISI, Trump's framing it in a misleading way to make it look like he's got the upper hand. In reality, these tariffs are doing more harm than good. A 2024 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods reduced U.S. manufacturing employment by 1.4%, that's over 200,000 jobs lost, folks. So much for bringing jobs back. Now, let's talk about this whole rare earths and magnets up front nonsense. For those of you who don't know, rare earths are critical minerals used in everything from electric vehicles to defense systems. China controls about 80% of the global supply, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, and they've been using that dominance as a bargaining chip in this trade war. Trump's acting like getting China to ship these materials, up front, is some kind of victory, but here's the catch, China's only issuing 6-month export licenses. Why? Because they want to keep their leverage, as reported by the Wall Street Journal. If trade tensions flare up again, and let's be real, they always do, China can just turn off the tap. And what's the U.S. doing in response? Oh, just easing export controls on key technologies and letting Chinese students back into our universities. Sounds like a fair trade, right? Wrong. This is a classic case of the government selling out long-term national security for short-term economic gains. China's been trying to get its hands on advanced U.S. tech, especially in AI and chip design, for years. And now, under the guise of opening up trade, the U.S. is giving them access to the very tools they need to outpace us in the global tech race. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick even admitted on CNBC that, we're not going to give them our best chips, but let's be real, easing export controls is a slippery slope, and the government's track record on managing this stuff is abysmal. Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, folks. This so-called deal is just the latest chapter in a long saga of government mismanagement that's pushing the U.S. economy to the brink of recession. Don't believe me? Let's look at the data. The U.S. trade deficit with China hit $419 billion in 2024, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, and it's on track to grow even more in 2025. Why? Because tariffs aren't fixing the fundamental issues, like China's massive trade surplus and their practice of dumping cheap goods on U.S. markets. Instead, the government's just slapping band-aids on a gaping wound and calling it a day. And here's the kicker, all this trade war drama is happening against the backdrop of a slowing global economy. The International Monetary Fund just downgraded its 2025 global growth forecast to 3.1%, citing, you guessed it, trade tensions as a major risk. Meanwhile, U.S. GDP growth is projected to slow to 1.8% in 2025, according to the Congressional Budget Office, down from 2.5% in 2024. And with inflation still hovering around 3.5%, thanks in part to those lovely tariffs, the Federal Reserve stuck between a rock and a hard place: raise interest rates and risk a recession, or keep them steady and watch inflation spiral out of control. But hey, at least Trump and she have an excellent relationship, right? Give me a break. This isn't a deal, it's a diplomatic dumpster fire. And the worst part? The government's not even pretending to fix the root causes. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer admitted on June 10, 2025, that no further meetings are scheduled, and China's trade negotiator Li Qinggang is out here talking about building trust. Trust? Folks, the only thing you can trust is that this trade war is going to keep dragging on, costing jobs, raising prices, and tanking the economy, all because the clowns in Washington can't get their act together. So, who's winning here? Not you, that's for sure. The real winners are the big corporations that can afford to lobby the government for exemptions and subsidies. Take the rare earths issue, for example. The American Chamber of Commerce in China reported a huge backlog of export license applications, but guess who's getting fast-tracked? The big players with deep pockets and political connections. Meanwhile, small businesses and consumers are left holding the bag, paying higher prices and dealing with supply chain disruptions. And let's not forget the geopolitical angle. China's playing the long game, folks. They're using their rare earth dominance to secure concessions on tech and education, all while building up their own domestic industries. Just look at their Made in China 2025 plan. They're aiming to dominate high-tech manufacturing, and deals like this are just helping them get there faster. Meanwhile, the US government's too busy slapping tariffs and tweeting in all caps to come up with a coherent strategy. It's economic malpractice, plain and simple. Here's the bottom line, folks: this deal isn't a win, it's a disaster. It's a textbook example of government mismanagement, short-term thinking, and economic posturing that's driving us straight into a recession. Tariffs are killing jobs and raising prices, the rare earths game is a national security nightmare, and the broader trade war is a lose-lose for everyone except the corporate cronies and foreign competitors. And the worst part? The government's not even trying to fix the real problems. They're just kicking the can down the road, hoping you won't notice the economic train wreck coming your way. So, what can you do? Stay informed, folks. Keep watching Boss Economics World, where we call out the clowns in charge and give you the real story behind the headlines. And hey, maybe it's time to start asking your elected officials why they're so busy playing trade war games instead of fixing the economy. Until next time, this is your host, signing off, because someone's gotta tell it like it is.